Peppa Pig, Dark Water. It started in the morning. Daddy Pig went to wash up and noticed something strange. Thick black water was coming out of the bathroom tap. It smelled faintly of smoke. At first, he thought it was just dirty pipes, but the blackness wouldn't wash away, not even with soap. Later that day, the black water appeared in the kitchen. It dripped steadily from the faucet, leaving behind oily streaks in the sink. Peppa noticed dark circles under Mummy Pig's eyes, as if she hadn't slept, though she acted like everything was fine. George became quiet. Daddy Pig stopped making jokes. That night, the room Peppa and George shared felt damp. There were no pipes there, no taps, but the air was heavy and wet. The window fogged from the inside, drops gathered on the glass. The wallpaper began peeling at the corners. A thin black line crept in from under the bedroom door, as though water had seeped in from elsewhere. The next morning, George's skin looked darker, as if he'd gotten dirty, but it wouldn't wash off. His eyes were dim. He sat still, staring at nothing. Mummy Pig darkened first. Her pink skin turned gray, then nearly black. She tried to smile, but her mouth didn't move. By midday, she was gone. No one saw her leave. She simply wasn't there anymore. Only a damp trail remained in the hallway, leading toward the bathroom. Daddy Pig turned black by evening. He stood by the window, black tears slowly dripping from his eyes. Peppa watched from behind the door. He turned to look at her, but said nothing. A moment later, he vanished. His glasses were left on the windowsill, next to a stain that wouldn't dry, wouldn't soak in, wouldn't fade. George disappeared during the night. Peppa woke to silence. His bed was empty, his pillow damp. Beside it were tiny wet hoofprints. The bedroom door was slightly open. A thin black trail stretched from it into the dark hall. But where it led, no one could tell. Peppa was alone. She didn't cry. She simply stood in front of the mirror, watching as her hooves turned gray, then black. A moist shadow crept across her forehead. Her veins were dark. She felt no fear, only exhaustion. By morning, the house was empty. The taps were dry. Every mirror fogged over. In Peppa's bedroom, one final message had been written by a finger in the window's condensation. Now we live under the skin. The surrender of shadows. One evening, the pig family returned home after a long walk in the forest. The house was unusually quiet, as if everything had stopped. There was an odd silence in the air, and the shadows outside the window looked long and distorted. The temperature in the house felt cold despite the warmth outside. Everything around them seemed to have lost its brightness. Peppa entered her room and immediately noticed that her toys on the shelf were turned upside down, and some of them looked strange. Their eyes were dull, and their expressions had become grim. When she touched one of the toys, her fingers passed right through it, as if it were nothing more than mist. Peppa felt her unease growing, and as she turned around, one of the shadows on the wall began to move, stretching as if it were following her. She quickly left her room and headed toward her parents. But when she entered their bedroom, they appeared strangely calm. Mama Pig was sitting motionless in a chair, and Daddy Pig stood by the window, staring into the dark fog outside. Their eyes were empty, and they didn't move, as if they hadn't noticed her presence. Peppa's heart began to race, and she realized that something was wrong in the house. The shadows on the walls started to move, growing longer and darker, as if something in them was coming to life. Peppa hurried downstairs, but the farther she went, the darker the house became. The shadows behind her continued to stretch, swallowing everything around her. She turned to look back and saw one of them, large and ominous, step closer toward her. Peppa tried to run, but her legs wouldn't obey. With every step, she felt her body growing lighter, losing its form, as though she were dissolving into the shadows. The monstrous black spots rushed to engulf the space around her. Peppa tried to scream, but no sound came from her throat. only deep silence absorbed by the darkness. Eventually, she felt herself disappear. Her body became invisible, and the house empty. Everything around her faded into darkness, and Peppa was swallowed by the shadow, becoming part of it. Along with her, her parents and everything that once filled the house with light and life vanished. Left without form, she became a part of that dark space. The next morning, the house remained empty. No trace of the pig family, nothing that could remind anyone of them. The house became abandoned, consumed by the shadow that now ruled it. Anyone passing by noticed only the strange silence emanating from the place. And though years passed, the shadows in that house continued to move, waiting for new souls brave enough to disturb this world. Transparent Peppa. One morning, Peppa woke up feeling a strange lightness in her body. At first, she thought it was just fatigue, but when she looked in the mirror, she noticed that her reflection appeared a bit dull. It seemed like her outlines were less vivid, and Peppa became slightly scared. The next day, while having breakfast, Peppa noticed that her hand seemed to disappear if she raised it too high. She tried to touch her cup, but her fingers simply passed through it, as if her body was beginning to dissolve into the air. Peppa told her parents about this, and they immediately became worried. Daddy Pig thought it was probably just a temporary problem, but as the day went on, the situation only got worse. Peppa became more and more transparent, and her voice grew fainter and fainter. George tried to hold her hand, but his fingers just slipped right through hers. By the third day, Peppa was almost completely gone. She couldn't walk anymore. Her body was simply invisible, and she could barely speak. Her parents tried to help her, but everything they said seemed to be swallowed by the fog. In desperation, they turned to Granny Pig for help. She explained that this phenomenon was tied to an ancient curse placed on those who forget about the important things in life for too long. She told them that Peppa had not noticed how much time she wasted on trivial things, ignoring her loved ones and important moments. Granny Pig tried to cast a spell to bring Peppa back, but nothing worked. With every word, with every step, Peppa became even more invisible, until at one point she was gone completely. The house grew dark and empty, as though life itself had left it. Her parents and George searched for Peppa, calling her name, but there was no answer. They realized that their daughter was gone forever, and that her invisibility had become part of their reality. The shadows that once filled their lives were now empty. Peppa vanished, and with her all the joy she had brought to the house. The pig family was left alone in a house that no longer felt like a home. And though they tried to forget and move on, every day reminded them of how those we love can disappear if we don't appreciate them in time. Endless room. After dinner, Peppa and George go up to their room. It's an ordinary evening. Toys are scattered around, the nightlight glows warmly, and the window shows nothing but darkness. They go to bed, unaware that the morning will bring something strange. When Peppa wakes up, she stretches and walks to the door. But as she opens it, she freezes. Behind the door is their room. Everything is exactly the same. The beds, the toys, the window with dim morning light. She blinks, trying to make sense of it. She steps back and wakes George. Together they try again. But behind the door is still their room. Over and over they open the door, but they never leave. They only enter the same space again and again. At first it seems like a silly game, but soon the fun turns into unease. The objects in the room are just slightly off. The bed sheets are rumpled in a way they don't remember. A toy that was on the floor is now on the shelf. The windows show nothing but a gray, endless void. No sun, no street, no sky. They search for a way out, opening the closet, checking under the beds, looking behind the curtains. It's useless. The space is closed in on itself. The clock ticks, but time feels strange. It never really becomes daytime or nighttime. The light remains the same, frozen in a single moment of mourning. In one of the rooms, the beds are empty, yet the sheets are still dented as if someone just got up. Peppa notices something unsettling. Every time they enter a new room, tiny details change. The toys are slightly rearranged. The wardrobe is now slightly open when it wasn't before. In one mirror, Peppa's reflection lags behind by a fraction of a second. Eventually, something like nighttime arrives. The light dims, but not completely. They lie down, deciding to wait until morning. But sleep brings no relief. When they wake up, everything is exactly the same. Their attempts to escape continue, but soon they lose track of how much time has passed. Day fades into night without a setting sun. And then, in one of the rooms, their reflections are gone from the mirror. And then, for the first time, the door opens by itself. But beyond it, there is no new room. There is only an endless black void.